When is too much and enough going to be too much and enough with the exploding rates of autism? Autism rates are rising exponentially, with recent statistics estimating that 1 in 36 children are now on the autism spectrum, and much higher even for boys. And just 1 in 2 generations ago, at most, it was 1 in 1,500. It's time to take this way more seriously and address the root causes of autism head on. Instead of simply continuing to blame genetics and say that we don't know what's going on. If you or someone you know has a child with autism, undoubtedly as a parent, the first question you asked was why? Specifically, is autism genetic? Still today, this is a long held assumption that genetics and heritability must explain sharp increases in diagnosis and the wide variation in symptoms across the spectrum. However, we're here today to challenge that assumption and propose an empowering new perspective backed by emerging science. While genes do, of course, play a role through something called genetic predisposition, even traditional medical doctors and media outlets are now being forced to admit that there is an environmental factor. Well, they pretty much leave it as that a general blanket statement regarding the environment. We do the opposite. This video and all of our content will take you deep into the real root cause and known triggers of autism spectrum disorders. We know now that there is a full-on environmental perfect storm brewing for kids struggling with autism, and genetics only plays a small role in that whole picture. This video is for parents and caregivers of children anywhere on the autism spectrum seeking clarity, community, and care options that dive deep into the real root cause of autism rather than merely calling it genetic and hoping to work around the challenges that autism presents. We're going to explore evidence on the genetic links to autism and why genes alone fail to explain recent rises in autism. Instead, we'll introduce what we call the perfect storm, where accumulated stressors and dysfunction disrupt nervous system function over months and years, altering childhood development. Parents, you're going to find some drug-free answers to help start your child's perfect storm. Let's talk about Evan. After 3 years of constant struggles with everything from sleep to sensory meltdowns, speech delays, major motor tone and coordination challenges, constipation, chronic respiratory infections, and everything else, his parents took him in for a full day neuropsych evaluation shortly after his 3rd birthday. It was here that they received his autism diagnosis and also were told that there's nothing you can do to help. His birth had nothing to do with it. His gut issues have nothing to do with it. Diet changes won't help. Just get used to it and save your money because one day you'll be older and he'll be bigger and you'll need to put him in a home when you can't take care of him anymore. How sad is that? So one of the number one questions that parents ask is what's causing the autism? When parents ask why autism occurs, mainstream medicine often says that better recognition or genetics, etc., they only recently finally started to admit that there is also a mix of environmental factors at play. But then often little explanation or research behind that. While genetic factors are always at play for various conditions, we've known for nearly 2 decades now that genetics don't explain chronic illness all on their own. There is no single autism gene. Over 100 genes regulate risks, but mutations only appear in 10% of cases. So, what environmental factors matter the most? This is where things get fascinating, interesting, exciting, and frustrating all at the same time, because it's a multifactorial conversation and causes. Here's what we know about this perfect storm sequence, or the list of stressors and toxins. Prenatal or maternal stress is a big deal. We talk about how when moms are pregnant, their stress, how their body is running, really kind of programs baby. So if there's a lot going on in pregnancy, or even if there was a lot going on with fertility, that stress can start programming the baby to be in a higher state of stress. When we talk about birth interventions and trauma, they're also a big deal. So there's early exposure to antibiotics, medications, toxins. With birth intervention, there can be a lot of stress and tension on this upper neck area. And what do we always talk about in that upper neck? It is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is so important, and it really does control that social interaction piece, which we see a ton with autism spectrum disorders. So when there is stress and tension on the vagus nerve that controls the whole parasympathetic input for the body, then we know that those symptoms and systems are not working as well as they should be. We add in those antibiotics, those medications, those toxins, and then those are just added stressors building on and building on. It's really about all that accumulation of stress. And while as adults we think about how little stress a child is under, and really it's not necessarily emotional stressors. It can be chemical, it can be physical, and while it might not be emotional of how we think about it, it is that daily stress in their life where it's hard for them to learn how to sit, and it's harder than it should be. So that stress is adding into their nervous system stress. Because they've been alive for such a short period of time, those stressors accumulate much, much faster than they would in an adult, where an adult can process them and get through them a lot easier. So, on top of all of these things, there are some other clinical experiences and emerging research that's starting to talk about things like EMFs, mold, and other household toxins or chemicals, chemicals in food, soaps, detergents, all kinds of things. There's toxins in medications and other medical interventions. All of these toxins start building up. And now there's tons of it everywhere, even in our food. So what does the perfect storm do? These events lead to a neurological tipping point for many children where they may be developing normally or mostly on track. And then once all this stress and toxicity adds up or stacks up, their nervous system gets locked into a sustained, stuck fight or flight pattern of sympathetic dominance. Once the nervous system is shifted and stuck into this pattern, all of the development and general health functions are thrown off track. Gut and immune function, gross and fine motor, sleep, inflammation, and so much more. Once these challenges start to pile up and the brain and nervous system then get stuck and they get off track and begin to struggle with the core elements of autism, communication, social interaction, sensory processing, restricted and repetitive behaviors, stimming, and so forth, that's where everything starts to tip. So if your child has an autism diagnosis and you've been told that there's nothing you can do to help them heal because it's purely genetic, it's time to learn more about the role that environmental factors may have played and how your child really can heal and have a greatly improved quality of life. While mainstream medicine and media are finally admitting that there are environmental factors at play, they never dive deep and tell you what those truly are or how you can help. To learn more about exactly what environmental triggers and perfect storm factors occur that can increase the risk of autism and contribute to its related challenges, you can click the link in our bio to read the full article called Is Autism Genetic? And then get the answers and drug-free action steps that you deserve.